we're now officially recording, so anybody who's needing to disappear and not be seen, then now's the time. But Hazel's disappeared and coming back. Right, so Dan, I think an interesting one, which was it's been raised by a couple of people. Paul Cole and his son, Simon Crisford and his son. Where's Claire on your licence?
So basically, we're just waiting to get all the paperwork sorted out, because you have to do a whole bunch of training courses, and Claire was due to do them all, and then obviously they all got cancelled. So at the moment, she's been exempted from the one on the basis that most of the work was to do with finances, and as a qualified accountant, she was probably qualified to teach the course rather than have to take the course. And the other one was to do with, it mostly centered around staff management and things like that, which again, obviously, we've got a fairly good track record on that front. So I think they're basically trying to move a few things around, but they're normally pretty adamant about people going on these courses. So to get your training license, you have to meet various criteria, and one of them is to go and spend 3 weeks in Newmarket on week-long courses. The first one is absolutely compulsory; you can't avoid. Fortunately, Claire had already done that one, but she hadn't done the other two. But they were sort of booked in and ready to go, and then they got cancelled for obvious reasons. So that's the only reason it happened. I guess where these sons have sort of have joined the license, they were already in the position to do so, because I think sort of generally when you're working your way through the industry, at some point you go off and you go and spend a week doing that one, and a week doing that one, and a week doing that one. If at some point your ambition is to be a trainer, obviously Claire came from having grown up on the stud farm and then doing her accounting work and everything, and then sort of went, I suppose, kind of maybe shortcut some of the groundwork in the industry in terms of, she didn't work in racing yards for, 10 years before even thinking about getting a training license. She sort of very much went in as a pupil assistant at Willie Muir's, and then did a year of that, and then did, a couple of years as assistant in the States, and then back here in Newmarket with Jeremy Nazida. So she perhaps had less time to get those bits and pieces done than, maybe some others done. And then before you can even do that, you have to do an MVQ, which again is something that most people would do at some point, when they're fairly young, starting out in the industry. Whereas again, Claire, obviously had all that basic knowledge, having grown up what she did, but hadn't actually done the sort of paperwork. So she had to do that before she did the licensing course. A little bit frustrating, because we did a lot of the groundwork to get these joint licenses, to try and get the Australian model where these joint licenses are something that happens going forward. I think it's really important, not just for us, but there's plenty of scenarios where they make sense. And I think, generally, it's clearly a team effort, whoever's training the horse, unless you're perhaps one man training two horses, you pretty much, otherwise you need someone else to do, to help you do it. So I think it's something you're going to see more and more of, and it's going to help sort of continuity, and just, you're going to see a bit more kind of, I suppose, the team. It just builds that concept of team and working together, as to what it takes to put a horse on the track from a training perspective, I think. So, we're certainly something that's not too far away, but it's a administration exercise.
Yeah, as well as I've learned in the past few years, the racing and admin tend not to go as smoothly or as easily as you would particularly like. It's there's a very varying levels of admin and how it's processed through this world, but it's gradually getting better. Every year it seems to be getting that little bit better. But
I think licensing, it's quite important that it is quite rigorous, because at the end of the day, if you're as a licensed trainer, it's quite a lot of responsibility, and you've got a responsibility to the sport as a whole, because one bad egg, one badly licensed trainer brings the whole reputation of the sport down. So I don't have a problem with it being as rigorous as it is, even though when you have to go and jump through the hoops, particularly in this scenario, it's a little bit of a pain in the backside. But, you know, everyone who's got a license has been through it at this stage. So maybe some of the real old school boys, but even they had to. It's probably not as bad as it used to be. I mean, David Ellsworth can tell brilliant stories about having to go and sit in interviews with jockey club members and being sort of admonished as to where he was going to get the funds to train from, and you know, what was his qualification to be able to train racehorses and all the rest of it. I think he had the last laugh, but anyway.
You know, it's a tricky one. I think in a lot of industries, you know, you can get credit for experience, even if I suppose you go for a degree in educational ways. At times, you can get a degree for experience you've done in an industry, but obviously, it's a little bit more not as easy to carry that over in the racing world, no? Like, you know, so the fact that Claire's been your assistant for.
Well, I think the issue probably comes from, you know, particularly when you start training racehorses, a big element of it is the slightly boring business side of it. But actually, you know, and a lot of people coming to it wouldn't necessarily have that sort of professional experience of thinking about HR and drawing up contracts and, you know, running the account side of it. You know, they're very much horsemen and women who've got a lot of experience. You know, most trainers are very good. You know, they're very good with the horses. Their weaknesses would come in other areas as a whole. So it's ensuring that the group of people who have the knowledge of how to look after horses to a very high standard can actually run a functional business. Because if the business stops working, then the horses will start to suffer. Because if there's not, you know, if the business, quite simply, if a training business is not well financed, it's not, you know, you can't look after the horses to the level that's required, you know, and it's so, and meeting all those criteria and doing all that stuff is important, and maybe that's where, because of the nature of it being a very, I think where racing is probably different to a lot of jobs and career paths, perhaps, is that it requires an awful lot of people on the sort of the base level. As Henry Cecil always used to put it, he said, you know, you need a lot of Indians and not many chiefs. And it, you know, there's a lot of hard basic work that just needs to be done. You know, the main element of the work is riding out the horses, grooming them, and mucking them out every day. You know, and then taking them racing. That's by far the majority of the work. And the sort of administration side of it is a relatively small bit. And you know, if someone's training 200 horses, they've probably only got an office of 3 or 4 people running that. You know, and similarly, you know, us training 30, there's 3 of us who work in the office, you know, although we go out and do bits on the yard as well. But you know, actually, so there's not that many opportunities in the industry to get that experience of the office side of it. And, you know, even as an assistant and a pupil assistant trainer or a head lad, you know, there's a little bit of administration, but by far the bulk of your work is day to day is the horsemanship and that side of things, you know, caring for the horses. So it's difficult for people to get that knowledge and be put in that position where they're really making those kind of decisions and involved with that side of it. And, you know, as a trainer, you have to run a business. And so I guess that's where it comes from.
I'm always going to sound like I know what I'm doing here with the way this question's going to link in quite nicely. But you guys have done very well with the staff awards, you know, winning this year, going very close last year. You know, every time I've been down to the yard, the staff are exceptionally good. They're very good with not just with the horses, but also with people. And I think it's a case of, you know, where do you find them? How do you keep them? Everybody keeps telling me that there's an issue in the industry, and, you know, there is this whole challenge of trying to work out, you know, how to get staff, keep staff, get good staff. Clearly, it's something you and Claire have got pretty well sussed.
I don't think it's something that we've got sussed, but because I think it's the most challenging element of running probably any business is managing your people, and I think, you know, when you start training again, going back to what I was saying, you know, you're all focused on the horses and you don't really think about, oh, you know, actually, you know, in some ways, your primary responsibility is you've got to, you know, you've got to be able to pay the people that are doing the job, and so I think you very quickly have to learn how to motivate people and how to manage a team, and I think I'm lucky because I came to the sport from completely the outside. I had no family connections. I had no preconceptions about this is the way things are always done. You know, as a kid, I did sort of, you know, various Saturday jobs and bits and pieces, worked in a supermarket a bit, you know, did various different things like that, and worked in different places. And, you know, even while I was at university, I did a couple of jobs in different areas where perhaps got experiences of different work environments. And I think it was always very apparent that racing was run on quite an old-fashioned way of thinking, and it was something I always felt like could be done better. So it's something that's quite close to my heart, I suppose. You know, and I worked my way up from the bottom of the industry, as it were, and sort of, so I've done all those jobs, and there's perhaps not enough trainers. You know, I think a lot of trainers, you know, they take over from a parent or a relative, and they've never really had to actually make a living at the bottom end of the sport and actually understand what you're asking people to do. So, and again, you know, Claire, obviously, she came from a background of having worked in, you know, the corporate world, where training and development is really sort of important, and you know, particularly PricewaterhouseCoopers, you know, they'd be sort of renowned for developing people and looking after their people and creating a culture and things. And I think, you know, the two of us, it's always been something we've been conscious of, and I think, you know, you can't, as an industry, the sport can't, you know, people can't keep doing the same thing and expecting the same result. You know, it's no different to training a horse. If you keep doing the same thing and you keep not getting the result you want, you have to change something, you know. Now, it might not be that you can change that, but so for us, you know, looking after our staff and motivating them has always been important, and you know, we put quite a lot of work into it. We put quite a lot of effort into it, and you know, over time, you create a culture and you create a group of people who are committed to what you're doing, and you know, sort of buy into what you're doing, and then hopefully anyone new who starts buys into that as well. And you know, a lot of people who come into the industry are quite young, and I think, you know, young people, doesn't matter what industry they go into, you know, people do change careers, and there's nothing wrong with that. So there is always going to be an element of turnover of staff, and you know, again, because there's that sort of that plateau within a racing yard of, you know, having to be, a lot of people do the fairly, you know, I wouldn't call it mundane work, but you know, the everyday work, and not that much opportunity for progression. You know, again, you know, for 30, 40 horses, you probably need one yard manager, or what old-fashioned people would call head lad, head lass. So, you know, but you need probably one person for every 3 horses. So, you know, the pyramid is not big. One, it's not very tall. There's probably only 2 or 3 layers, but it's got a very wide base and a very narrow top. So, you know, those opportunities aren't there. So, you know, inevitably people find a niche within it, and then they maybe want to go into another element within the sport, or they leave the sport completely. But, you know, I think our job, you know, is to develop people as much as we can. And for some people, you know, we've helped some people go on to the university and study something completely different. We've got one girl who used to work for us, an occupational therapist now, one girl who works in horticulture, and then we've got others who still, you know, very much work in the industry and have been with us for a long time.
No, it's kind of a thing that, you know, well, I know personally it's not something I'd really particularly given a massive amount of thought to. I know that probably Mary's seen a lot of that. She used to be down at the gas yard quite a lot, so she's probably got to know a lot of the different levels of how people work. But it is interesting to see that is, I suppose, it's a challenge that the lack of progression. So I suppose if you're getting people in who've got a bit of ambition, who really want to, so you're really looking for people who see it as a vocation, rather than a long-term option. So they've got to be people who absolutely love the horses. They're not going into it as a career.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone starts the job, or certainly anyone who starts the job doesn't last very long if they don't love the horses, because that has to motivate. You have to be motivated by the sport and by the horses. But I think for us it's really important that we develop people and give them every opportunity to learn and improve their skill set. And I think that's something that lacks in maybe some other yards. And I think it's something that we've really focused on trying to do and develop people. And a lot of people say, "Oh, Yardman's a Yardman, he mucks out boxes." Whereas our view would be very much like, okay, well, you can muck out the boxes, or actually you can really, really become a great horseman, and really everything that goes with that. And at the end of the day, if we've got someone who, although on paper his job might be that he mucks out boxes, if every time he walks in that stable he notices the smallest change in a horse, we're picking up stuff far quicker and can make adjustments to that horse's training and routine. And so it becomes about attention to detail and stuff. And, if you've got someone who's motivated and passionate and interested about what they're doing, they're going to care for those horses so much better. And, that makes a difference in the results out on the track. And, I think it's something we've always been conscious of, but I think something the last 2 or 3 years we've worked really hard on is trying to improve that team, the team around us and who they are. We were perhaps fortunate very early in our training career, sort of through circumstance. We ended up with a very good team of very experienced people before we moved to Lambourn. And we had our second season was absolutely cracking, but, we had, riding out for us, we had four people who were, two of the lads were still pointing a lot. The one guy had ridden a stack of winners over jumps, and one girl had ridden as an amateur. So that was 4 of our riders. And the other guy was the guy who's been down in Whitesbury, who's one of David Ellsworth's top work riders, then one of Rafe Becker's top work riders, and still in his 50s, he's riding probably Marcus Tregoning's best horse at the moment. So he was just a serious horseman, and that was more because of where we were and a set of circumstances, and it just panned out that way, and we were fortunate. And it was easy working with that team. They were experienced horsemen, and it made our job very easy. And we came to Lambourn, and when we first moved, we struggled. We only took 2 staff with us, and we had to quickly find a lot of staff. And it's taken us time to build that team up again. And I think the last couple of years we've really started to get there. And I think we had a good set of results last year, and I think a lot of that was down to really having one, we'd moved and we had these great facilities that we've got here at Sarston Farm. But I think the other thing that was key was we had a really good, the teams really started to grow and gel, and really some experience. Some of the people we've brought on are becoming pretty experienced, and then, again, that's attracted some good people from outside. So, no, I'm sort of happy with where we are, but I think it's something we need to keep pushing on. Being recognised as leaders in the industry is a good thing, but, I want to keep breaking the boundary in the mould and setting, kind of leading the way. And as I say, we advertised for a job a couple of weeks ago, and we had 20, 25 applications. Well, everyone's telling me that they can't get staff. So it's not that the people aren't out there. The people are out there. It's, people need to look at what they're doing, I think, without wanting to be too harsh on anyone.
So thinking about the stable and the staff, when's going to be an opportunity that people can come down and see the horses and yourself and Clay and the staff? And what is the update of where you're at for access to the yard at the moment?
So we're still being advised that we can't do big open days and etc. in big groups. So, but we can have sort of individual type visits. So, if someone wants to come down with their partner, or a friend or something like that, or even on their own, or whatever the scenario. But really, it's about the social distancing and keeping space, and but big groups is obviously not plausible. At the end of the day, the restrictions when we go racing are still quite it seems like the restrictions that are placed on us when we go racing seem quite heavy-handed compared to what you can do in other places. Now, that's partly because if we do get lockdowns again or go back into lockdown or whatever, racing is a position whereby its model can keep going through that. So, one of the things about that is basically keeping things relatively under control. And again, that's restricting. There was some guidance put out by the BHA actually yesterday that was pretty clear cut on not doing open days. So unfortunately, we can't do that. But I think, it's certainly something we can sort of do, sort of individual visits and that side of thing. I've got no problem doing that, and no problem doing that for people who are sort of shareholders within Horses from Crowd Racing. They've done a great job on the gallops around here. Before, you kind of had to bumble along in the trainer's jeep, whereas actually now there's good tarmac roads up to the main viewing spots on the gallops, so you can follow up in your own car and all that kind of stuff. Is and we've got this big open owners lounge where it's easy to keep everyone apart if there's only sort of 2 or 3 people. So it very much is feasible to do small visits. Unfortunately, we can't do big visits at the moment. So that's sort of where we are with that side of things at the moment. And I guess we'll await further guidance from the BHA and their wisdom.
Fair play. What did you think of the Derby? Do you think the bad riding, fortunate winner, just...
I think we probably saw a pretty good horse win the Derby. I think whether we saw the best horse win the Derby, I don't know. But, the time was not slow. An hour before, everyone was lauding Love for her performance and how stunning it was, and she looks like a real, and she does look like a very, very good filly, and all the chat is, can she take on the Colts and all the rest of it? Well, the Derby winner only ran 7/700ths of a second slower than her, so if she's that good, he can't be that bad either, because time is important. Look, he was given an exceptionally good ride. I think I can understand to an extent. I think if anyone hasn't seen Oisin Murphy's piece, it's well worth watching and listening to it. He puts it far better than I will. You can understand what he was trying to do, and in fairness to him, the day before he'd said, I'd be worried about that horse getting loose on the front end. It's very difficult. I think it's easy watching to think, but it's very difficult when you're sat there behind. I think, Tom Marquand was sat there in second on his horse, and you could almost see him hesitating. Do I go and chase this thing because it's going away from me? But he knew to do that, his horse did not have the ability and wasn't going well enough, and he would have compromised his opportunity of finishing second or third. By doing so, he'd have probably ended up finishing 5th or 6th. And he wouldn't have been the only rider going through that process. I think, looking on the sectional times and everything, English King clearly is a very able horse and finished very strongly. His finishing sectionals were very good. Again, he jumped left out the gate, which didn't help, and very typical of a horse, particularly an inexperienced horse that's drawn on the wing. If you watch racing, you look at the horse on the outside, so often it jumps away from the field. It's natural instinct. A lot of horses do it. And it cost them 2 or 3 lengths. And, in a race like that, it cost him position. He was further back. Now, if they'd gone really hard, that would have been fine. And for the first couple of furlongs, I'm sure Frankie's sitting there thinking, well, I'm fine here. As long as the pace is strong, he'd have been absolutely, he'd have been in a good place. Unfortunately, the way the race panned out, the horses that were sat near the front end, they didn't really have the ability to go and chase down that winner without compromising their opportunity. So it sort of suited them. Don't forget, a lot of the riders had ridden in the Oaks where 2 had gone absolutely flat out. So I think you have to be a little bit forgiving, but I wouldn't underestimate the performance of the winner. I think it was an interesting race. Did the best horse win? Probably not. Is the winner a good horse? Yes. Sorry, maybe I'm sitting on the fence there, but I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't win another good race, or certainly show up well in good races. Show up well in top races. I
think the way the Derby was run was kind of exaggerated by the number of other races on the same day, where a horse got a little bit away at the front and just wasn't coming back to them.
You'll see it at any meeting. I mean, you go to Chelmsford on a Wednesday evening or something, and you'll watch, and in the first race, the winner will go off the front, and in the second race, the winner will go off the front, because generally the way the track's configured and the way it rides, it favours that. So by the third race, the lads are starting to think, okay, let's kick on from the, we've got to kick on. And by the sixth race, they're going so fast on the front that suddenly horses start coming off the back because they're overdoing it. And people get carried away with the effect of a bias and things like that. And then you'll see the same at other tracks. There'll be this sort of, you can't win from the front. And so they start going steadier and steadier and steadier. And then suddenly someone does win from the front because they've gone so slow that when they do kick, it's impossible to make up even 2 or 3 lengths. So, you have to be careful of tactics on the day and how the previous races influence the thinking of the weighing room as the day goes on. You always have to be careful about particularly pace biases. Track biases, not so much, because there's normally a reason why they keep winning up the stand side, because the ground's quicker on the stand side. But
it is tricky. I mean, there's been a lot of questions coming through with timing, and talking with timing. I've just had a message here from Zoom that they are going to limit this to another 2 minutes 45 seconds, and they won't allow me to extend it. So I'm a little bit confused why they won't let me extend it, but because we've bought the advanced package. But so what I'll just try to do is just answer a couple more quick fire ones, Dan, because we're going to have to wrap things up. Bowling Park, was it a surprise or was it expected?
No, I thought he'd run well. I was disappointed with how he'd run first time because he'd been showing up quite well at home. He's shown a lot of ability. He was a little bit errant on his first start. He wasn't the most straightforward. He was a bit, he was green, but he was also sort of hanging a little bit, which was a bit unusual. So perhaps tempered enthusiasm for the second start after being slightly disappointed first time. And also, I was led to believe that the horse that finished second is quite a smart horse, and certainly the form of the second horse stacks up well. She ran in a good race before, so it has to be encouraging for his future. Obviously, for the guys involved with Sonia Torre, although we're off games at the moment, the two of them spent an awful lot of time galloping up sides in the spring and whatever, and there was never really much between them. So obviously that's encouraging and a bit of light at the end of the tunnel on that one. But yeah, I think a nice horse, and look, we'll see that, own a breeder horse. They've got the mare. They'd be keen for the mare to get some black type. I think we could probably, it's probably worth having a shot at something. I think he'd be better over a mile. So yeah, quite an exciting horse, and whether he is black type or not, I'm not quite sure. But David was sort of, he felt it was worth a go. He said probably take on as good horses in a strong novice as you will, in a listed race or something. So anyway, I think it's something we'll give a shot anyway. So that's
right, well, listen, I'm going to get you to say goodbye before we lose everybody. I'm going to feel this is just going to literally go dark. So before it does that, I will make sure before we do another one of these that I understand why this is now cutting us out at 40 minutes. But we had planned on doing 45 minutes anyway, so I suppose, we're not a million miles off what we'd planned to do. But we'll make the video available. There's a couple of questions come through there, Dan, that I'll fire you through an email later, and we just when I send the video out, I'll send the answers to those questions out as well, if you think that's worthwhile.
Yeah, sure.
And we can catch up very soon. But anybody's thoughts or feedback on how we could do this better or different next time, let me know.